Hi, welcome to T9 Hacks' fourth seminar on equality. T9 Hacks is happening March 19th to the 21st. These seminars are basically to inspire and teach people of the topic we're discussing today. Today, we have the amazing Simone Johnson joining us. Thank you so much for being here. I now invite you to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much for having me. My name's Simone, and my pronouns are she, her. And I am based in Denver on occupied Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute territory. I am a project manager at an organization, a social impact organization called Future Coalition. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I was in TAM about 5 years ago, and it was definitely one of the highlights of my time at CU. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you guys. So hopefully what I share with you resonates, and I'm happy to dive in it right now if that makes sense. Um, I don't have any slides. And so I encourage you to just like listen. I've been really into Clubhouse. I don't know if you guys know about Clubhouse, but I've been into like just putting in my AirPods and tuning out and listening. So if that resonates with you, that's great. If you want to keep your video on, that's awesome too. But I just know we're in Zoom a lot of the time these days. And so I understand if you're like not trying to stare at me this whole time. But I'm happy to share my experience, and then I'll leave some time at the end, I think, for some questions. Um, but I think I want to talk a lot about just what my experience was like at CU. I was actually reflecting on where I was at when I was in school. And so I think this like talk is very timely for me. But at CU, I was sort of pulled in three different directions. I was getting my BS in business, basically because my dad told me to. And I was taking as many ethnic studies electives as I could because ever since I was in first grade, I really wanted to be an activist. And I was really inspired by the Black Panther Party. And I was also getting the minor in TAM because I have an arts background. I went to an arts high school, and I just always felt like I was an artist, and I still do. And so I sort of was in college thinking, oh, well, I'll just do everything. And then hopefully one of these paths will pan out. And I sort of constantly felt like I was being pushed in these different directions. So I would hear my classmates at the business school talking about getting jobs at Goldman Sachs and Target and Google. And I would start to second guess why I wasn't interested in going for jobs at these big household names. And I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I should. And then my ethnic studies professor was sort of side-eyeing me. I told him that I was getting my business degree, and he kind of side-eyed me about it. And I started to second guess how I could work towards a degree that was rooted in capitalism while I was learning about all of the ways that capitalism was exploiting Black and Brown communities. And then I don't know if you guys know Eileen, but she was a teacher for me when I was at TAM. And Eileen, I was in her coding classes, and I was struggling so much with JavaScript. My friend basically built my final project for me. And then she asked me if it would be featured in like the TAM showcase. And I felt immense guilt because I was like, here's this project that I needed so much help building, and now it's being featured in this showcase. And so I just felt so conflicted, and I felt like I was constantly like looking to other people to validate my direction. And my arts high school education I was really lacking in math. I was really lacking in science. I just had so much catching up to do when I got to CU. And so I felt this sort of high level anxiety, especially when it came to business classes. I was sort of afraid to speak up, which wasn't natural for me. Like, I'm a very outspoken person, but I was the only Black woman in these classes most of the time. And the business school was very buttoned up and very standard. And I am not buttoned up, and I am not standard. And so during college, I felt like I changed many times, and I felt sort of like I lost my roots for a little while. And I actually think that that's okay, because I think in your 20s, this is sort of a time for you to figure yourself out. and you're meant to not know what you want to do. You're meant to try a lot of different things. And so just remember that if that's a feeling for you, even beyond your 20s, like if you're in your 30s, if you're older, like it's natural and it's okay to feel this way. And I think we put a lot of pressure on people to think that not knowing what you want to do is a bad thing. But if you're tracking towards those goals and you're thinking about what you want, that's what matters. And so I went through college, and then the best way I can describe my trajectory after college was basically expected. I had 3 different marketing jobs working in tech, and it was for mostly good people doing mostly good work for mostly good pay, but it was work that I wouldn't necessarily call meaningful. It wasn't bad work, but it wasn't purposeful. And so I was just trying to figure out my best path forward. And I was really, concerned about safety and security. And that had been something that was sort of drilled into my head for a long time of something that I needed to work towards. And so I was sort of like wandering. And it's that feeling of like, this is good enough for now, but it's not really the thing that I actually want forever. And I think when you feel this way, you have to be very careful, because this is a feeling that at first can feel like not a big deal. But if you sit in it for too long, you can start to feel stuck. And like for a while, I was like, oh, this is just like a natural part of life, which it is. But eventually that feeling, it started to make me feel suffocated. Like I felt stuck and I felt like I wasn't living to my full potential. And by the time I was 26, I was working a corporate job at an organization that was very traditional, very risk averse, and very conservative. And I say that because I am not traditional, I am not risk averse, and I am not conservative. And on top of that, I was in a marketing job, basically trying to market physics. And for me, that was just, it was not fun. It was very hard. And it wasn't hard in the challenging sort of sense. It was hard in sort of a debilitating sense. And so I was basically working at a company that didn't really align with my values. On top of that, I was in a stale relationship with my boyfriend of 5 years, and I desperately wanted to be on my own, but I didn't know how to tell him the truth. And so at this point, I basically accepted that with age, you give up pleasure, you give up joy. There are certain sacrifices you just make as you grow into adulthood. And I was like, life gets mundane. That's just a part of life. And I had absolutely no idea who I was. I was terrified of being alone, and I was terrified of the idea of not having money. And by the time I was 27, I was making 6 figures. I was on the path to get my boss's job. She was chief marketing officer at our company at the time. And if I had stayed there and stayed course, by the time I was 30, I would probably have been making $300,000, if not more. And I just want to pause for a moment here, because now you have a little bit of a background of who I am. And I want you to think how many times you compared yourself to me, and about what. And naturally, we're going to compare our experiences against each other because that's just human nature. But I just want you to take some time to think about if you compared yourself to me and why, and just notice how that makes you feel. My life was not bad, it was great. I was making good money and I was working at a job that was giving me stability, but I did not feel alive. And I was looking around at what my life was at 26, and I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, is this what it is for like 10 more years, 20 more years?" And that idea it really terrified me. And I was afraid of myself. I really didn't trust myself at this point in time. And I think it was very obvious because I was looking for every answer in every person but me. And I just want you to take another moment and I want you to think about if you trust yourself. And if you don't, why? because there were a lot of things that I wanted to do at this point in my life, but I was so afraid of what it would look like to take a risk. I was so afraid to think about what it would look like to fail. But more than anything, what I was afraid of is having to hold myself accountable if it didn't work out. And the thing about failure is that it's really easy to accept failure when you can blame other people. And so, my last question for you is, what is your biggest fear as you sit here at CU and you think about what you're going to do after this college experience is over? And if anyone would like to share, please feel free.
I mean, I think for me, I kind of like define myself in short term a lot, like based on kind of what I'm doing right now. Like when I'm in school, I'll, define myself based on the grades I get or something. But when I'm at work, I'll define myself based on like my performance there, and stuff like that. So I think for me, it's I want to let go of defining myself this way, but I feel like I'm getting into this habit, and when I graduate and work full time or something, I don't want to keep defining myself this way. So I guess that would be like a big fear for me.
Mm. Why are you so afraid of like measuring yourself against short term? Like to me, that means like I measure myself against these short term goals that in the future won't matter. And I don't know if I might be putting words in your mouth by saying that, but like, what is it about that short term view that makes you so fearful of like thinking that way in the future?
I mean, kind of like you said, I like some of these things won't matter in the future. And part of the problem is like right now, like they'll severely affect like how I feel about something or my experiences with like, some subject or some event or, um, one or the other. But like in the future, like I wonder if I'm going to, keep doing this I should, when I can look beyond that. Like I don't want to box myself in, I
Mm.
think is what I mean to say.
Right. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else want to share?
So we're sharing our main fear, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah, when I was at CU, I had lots of fears. But so if you want to share one or your biggest, that's great.
Yeah, you actually, one of my biggest fears is to be unhappy with what I do after college.
Mhm.
Um, I I'm scared that everything I've done up to this point is leading to nowhere.
Mm, that resonates with me a lot. Yeah. It's hard when, like, the future is so uncertain and it's so unknown. And I think sometimes the world teaches us to really like plan and prepare and be diligent and have like, know what you want. And um, there's beauty and essence in just figuring it out, but it can be very daunting. Thank you for sharing. Fiona, I don't want to put you on blast if you don't want to share, but since there's just a few of us, do you want to share? No worries if not.
Yeah, I would love to share. Sorry about my camera. I'm just
You're good. I get
very
it.
Zoom fatigued.
Yeah, girl, I get it.
But yeah, I just want to thank you for, sharing your story because I relate significantly. I'm actually a PhD student at CU, and when I was in undergrad, I was in mechanical engineering. I was one of the few girls in my program. Like I just felt so alone. Like all my friends were, you know, getting internships at big companies, and that didn't appeal to me at all. I didn't want to go into mechanical engineering, but I was like, well, I'm doing this. Here I am. And so for me, going to grad school, deciding to get a PhD was kind of a tricky decision, but it was very freeing because it was finally like doing something that I loved and enjoyed, because my PhD is now in the Atlas Institute and it's very creative and artistic and like all these things that I missed in, you know, when I was an undergrad. So now it's like finally get to explore something that I enjoy. So right now it's just I'm kind of on the high of like finally getting to do something different, because undergrad was not that long ago. So, you know, that whole memory is very fresh in my mind. So it's kind of been used as a motivator to just enjoy my time as a PhD student at CU much more.
That's really awesome. And that's awesome that you were able to, you know, feel what wasn't working and move towards something that sounds like it is.
Mhm.
And I think you should really like honor and celebrate yourself for doing that, because I think many times we're told to pursue certain paths because of what other people think is best for us. And I think they mean well, but listening to yourself is really important. Um, and I'm going to
Mhm.
share a little bit more of my story, and then hopefully we'll have some more time at the end to talk. I'm not going to talk for Dan was emailing me and told me I had like 40 minutes to talk. I'm not going to talk for 40 minutes, but I have a little bit more to share. Um, and I think like this idea of trusting yourself and just really listening to yourself is really important. I think the other thing that's equally important is that I don't believe that we succeed alone. And I really feel that who we surround ourselves with will make or break our potential. And that it's really important that we trust the people in our lives. And so I have a very special person in my life. His name is Tomas, and he's really helped guide me towards more. Tomas and I grew up. We've known each other since middle school, and more like a brother than anything. I feel like he and I always really knew that there was more to life than we knew it. His parents were active in the American Indian and Chicano movements. And as longtime activists, they always taught us that one, the education system lied to us, that there were whole worlds completely erased from history, but that still lived on. And most importantly, that life could look a lot better for a lot of people. And the Standing Rock Indigenous Uprising of 2016 happened when Tomas and I were 24. And this is when the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline was happening. And this was a pipeline that was being built in North Dakota, and it was transporting crude oil across the country. And it was going through Lakota territory, and it was threatening the water of the Cannonball and the Missouri rivers. And there was a call to people across Turtle Island to basically come and stand in solidarity with those water protectors who were putting their bodies on the front lines to try and halt construction of the pipeline. And this hit really close to home for Tomas because he's Dene, Apache, and Lakota. And Tomas and his community have been fighting for sovereignty over their rightful lands since the founding of the United States. And it hit really close to home for him because his cousins grew up in one of the poorest places in America, the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And it hit really close to home for him because his family and his family's home is just a few miles away from the Suncor oil refinery in Denver. And this is one of the biggest polluters of Colorado's land, water, and air. And it hit close to home for me because Tomas is my brother and his family is like a family to me. And I love and care for them very deeply. And so Tomas went to Standing Rock and he joined what was a campground called the International Indigenous Youth Council. And over the course of 4 years, we led this organization and we built it and created a nonprofit organization. And there's not enough time to really describe the exponential growth that happened for me while leading this organization as an ally. But the most important thing that I learned out of that experience was I'm not Native. I'm not Native American. And this presented its own set of challenges and lessons navigating a nonprofit that was built for and by Indigenous people. And I saw the Youth Council as an opportunity to make a difference. I saw it as a way to support Tomas. And quite frankly, I saw it as a way to make me feel better about the fact that I was sitting in a corporate office every day and I was saying, like, I was sitting there going, what am I doing? Like, I'm sitting here trying to sell people more broadband speeds that they don't even need. And people are like getting their arms shot off by, rubber bullets by police in North Dakota. And so I continued to be very unsure of my path for a few years because I had this tendency to listen to everyone but myself. And I always felt like somebody knew something that I didn't. And I never listened to my intuition or I never heard my intuition because I was never listening for it. My ear was always somewhere else trying to figure out what people knew that I didn't. And there were 2 traumatic events that happened to me in my childhood that taught me 2 really important lessons about why I was incapable of trusting myself. When I was 11, I stopped experiencing joy the way a kid is supposed to. At that point in my life, I basically learned that joy is something that can be taken from you. And from 11 onward, I felt completely unworthy of receiving or expressing joy. And when I was 15, I learned what it felt like to do something that you regret so much that you spiral down a rabbit hole of negative thoughts that you cannot stop thinking. And those are 2 really traumatic events that suppressed me from being able to tap into my emotions until probably literally like a year ago, maybe like 6 months ago, to be honest. And it's really hard to trust yourself if you have unhealed trauma. And so there came this moment in my life where I really had to face the honest fact that if I wanted to take accountability to live the life that I really wanted to, I had to heal my unhealed trauma. And there were 2 experiences that guided me to acknowledging and accepting and healing from this. And those 2 experiences really set the trajectory to transforming my life, but mostly my work and like feeling passionate and purposeful in what I do. And one of them is called Leadership Camp, which is actually a program based in Boulder. And this is a program that trains people to be good leaders. And in this program, I learned that I needed to work towards incorporating more room for joy in my life. That was the moment when one of the trainers literally revealed to me, like, Simone, you feel unworthy of experiencing joy. And I needed help realizing that. I didn't know that's what I was facing. And then the second program was called Hustle 2.0. And this is a rehabilitation program for incarcerated people. And they bring, business people to prisons, these maximum security prisons. And you work with people who are incarcerated to help them build their skills so that they can get back into society. They can get a job when they get out and they don't go back to prison. And in this program, I learned how to forgive myself for my deepest and darkest secret. And I now know that I'm worthy of joy, and I know that I'm worthy of forgiveness. And those 2 things were very, very important for me to learn in order to be able to trust myself. And the founder of Hustle 2.0, her name is Catherine Hoke. Kat has a book and it's called A Second Chance. And after Hustle 2.0, I read it. And inside the book, there's a pledge form. And the form is basically for people who are trying to take a risk, but they can't seem to get themselves to commit to it. And I pledged to quit my corporate job in 5 months so that I could find a job where I could serve others. And if I didn't, I was going to owe my friend $2,000. A month later, I quit my job and I started working for Future Coalition. And Future Coalition is essentially a national network and a community for youth-led organizations and young leaders. And we basically help young organizations operationalize so that they can make real impact. Because a lot of young people want to do something. They have purpose and they have passion, but they don't have the resources to know how or where to start. And we help them so that they can leverage resources and build their own community and resource their own community to make an impact. And for me, I've always been someone who takes great pride in standing behind my values. I'm not somebody who does well at organizations where I sort of have to keep politics at home. I don't do well at organizations that don't challenge the status quo. And I don't do well at organizations who have a hierarchical method for leadership or for getting things done. And at Future Coalition, I'm one of the oldest people on my team, and I'm 28. So I'm pretty young still. And so I work with these amazing young people who are smart and passionate and brilliant. And I feel grateful that Future Coalition can be that space where they can do the work without, having to succumb to some of these barriers that we see in larger organizations. And the Future Coalition team teaches me so many things that I would never have the capacity to master on my own. And I think the biggest thing about Future Coalition is it's a great org for me because we're aligned. The same values that I have are the values that Future Coalition has. So I believe that marginalized communities should be a priority for society, not an afterthought. And so does Future Coalition. I believe that society should be rooted in a balance of equity, that we should have balance, that there shouldn't be billionaires. So does Future Coalition. I believe that it takes a village to solve the climate crisis. And I believe that I'm a part of that solution. And so does Future Coalition. And I have this high level of autonomy in my role, and I get to work on these big picture ideas with people who dream of leaving a legacy behind. And I believe that I'm going to leave a legacy behind. I know that if I'm passionate about something, everything else can be learned. And I think I'm just really grateful that I got to a point of really being able to feel that. And I think that that's an important thing for you guys to think about as you enter the workforce, is not just like, oh, are there great perks at this org? Is this going to be like a place where I can climb the ladder? How do you think that org is going to make you feel every day that you're sitting there working? The best way I can describe how somewhere like Future Coalition makes me feel is skateboarding. So I recently learned how to skateboard this last summer. And when I skateboard, I just feel so tapped in. It's like time stops and I could just do it for hours and hours. And my heart feels like it could burst out of my chest. And I just want to take in every single breath that I possibly could. And that feeling to me is the feeling of joy. And it's that same feeling I get when I skateboard is the feeling I get when I'm tapped in at work and I'm reminded I am on my path and I am living my purpose. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for you is to figure out what your values are, because your values are going to inform your purpose, and that's going to inform who you align and center yourselves around, not just in work, but in your personal relationships. And take time to be with yourself. Take time to get to know and understand yourself and to really figure out what you value. And a lot of times that looks really like sitting with yourself, not distracting yourself from all the day-to-day things, but really taking moments to reflect. And I think we distract ourselves from growing to know ourselves by spending all of this time seeking validation from other people or other things. And so know your values, spend time writing them down, and just remember that life does not have to be mundane. And don't normalize the bare minimum, and don't normalize the bare minimum for yourself or the people that you center yourselves around, because you're capable of so much. You just need that moment to remind yourself of that. And so remember that feeling when you're completely tapped in, when time stops, and when you just feel like you're flying. And try to incorporate that into all of the work you do, the relationships you build. And that is personally my view of a life well lived. And yes, a life of happiness, but also one of challenge that will really motivate you to live fully. And that's all I have to share with you guys today. I really appreciate being here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know we have a little more time if you guys have any questions for me.
First, thank you so much for sharing everything you just did. I personally wish I would have heard all of that earlier on in my education. Um, and I think I I went through the path of, oh, what is everything? How is one happy? Oh, grade is the only thing that matters. I reached that point, I think last year actually, and it was being surrounded by people who didn't care about grades and who only thought about like the good and being inclusive, and diversity was everywhere, that it made me realize that being in that kind of environment was so amazing. So I totally agree that who you surround yourself with is so amazing. I don't even know how to describe it.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, being around people who understand your values and are like, we live in this world where it's like we're so based on metrics and like meeting the number and logic, and that stuff is important. It is. But when we don't have that balance and when we're not looking at the flip side to that, it really starts to intrude into like this unhealthy like dynamic, I think, a lot for a lot of students too, of just like so much pressure to feel like if you don't meet that threshold, that's the end of the road for you. And it's very misleading. And I love to tell young people I work with, like, C's get degrees, honey. Like, I got a D in accounting, and it was one of the most joyous occasions of my time because that meant that I didn't have to retake it. Like, and now I look, you know, I'm like done with school, and it doesn't even matter that I got a D in accounting, you know. So I feel that, and I'm glad that you found a community that really fits with, you know, your world. That's really great. I'm gonna drop, I don't have slides, but I made one slide. If you guys want to connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn, there are a few links in there too, to Future Coalition, to the International Indigenous Youth Council, and then the two programs that I participated in, Hustle 2.0 and Leadership Camp. And I also dropped some amazing books there that just have really been, they've helped me, you know, guide me to my own purpose and really like just be rooted in trusting myself. And so it was really nice to talk to you guys.
Thank you for coming and sharing your story. It's actually like really inspiring to see, considering that you're ahead of us in terms of your career. It's just inspiring to see that even down the road, we can make decisions like you, and we can change our minds, and we can find ourselves even if it takes a long time or if it takes a short time. So I really appreciate it, actually.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And just know it's all guiding you to where you're supposed to be. Got to trust that journey. Thank you.